Hi, this is Justin McWilliams. I'm the head of the Standardized Reporting Subcommittee for the SIR, and wanted to give an introduction to the newest generation of our standardized reports, including a little information about how to get them up and running at your institution, and then running through a report or two to see exactly how they're used and why we set them up the way we did. So right now they're just set up and optimized for PowerScribe 360. They can be converted for other dictation systems by use of the rich text files, but it would take a little bit of work. I only have PowerScribe 360, so that's what they've been optimized for thus far. This is just my PowerScribe 360 home screen, and we'll start by just pulling up one of the reports. In order for you to do this, you would download the report from the SIR website, and it would basically download as an XML file, and you may be able to pull that XML file into PowerScribe yourself, but here at my institution we just have our IT people do it for us, and they pull it into the PowerScribe and make it available, and then you can see it by going to Tools and clicking on Auto Text Editor, and then it should bring up under Owner, that's me, and it has a list of all of the templates I have. So I have all the new standardized reports start with the prefix SIR. So we'll just pull one up. We'll pull up the port template. So I double click there. And this is our port placement template. I tried to make these templates as general as I could, so that you don't have to have a million different templates, but at the same time I want them specific enough so that I can default a lot of the fields and make it so that you can get through the report with the fewest number of clicks. So we only have one template for venous port placement, but there would be separate templates for all the other different methods of central venous access, so that it makes it a lot less clicking and a lot less typing to do it this way. So here's our venous port template. The fields that are in red are pick list fields or fill-in fields. So either you have to type or dictate something there, or just select from a pick list. And some of these will auto-import without you having to input anything. So for example, signer name is actually an input that is auto-imported, so I don't have to type it. It will automatically fill in with my name. And our goal is to have more and more of those auto-imported data fields, but right now there's actually quite few. So these are defaulted as much as possible to what the most common entry would be, and then you just have to tab through or click through and make changes where necessary. So for example, in this port placement template, you'll notice first that the layout is rather different from what we've seen in reports in the past. The way we've set up the layout for these standardized reports is that we essentially have a short executive summary that is the first half page or page of the report, and that's followed by a procedure details section that has all of the minor details of the procedure. So in this case, the executive summary will have the procedure name, it'll have the procedural personnel, it'll have the pre and post procedure diagnoses, it'll have an indication, complications, the impression, and the plan. So this is everything that the clinician really needs right up front. Everything else is more for the use of other interventional radiologists or other people who want to see more detail of the procedure, including billers. So we also wanted to optimize these reports for billing. Part of doing that is having a procedure summary for every procedure, and so this has all the components of the procedure that were performed, and that way the billers can look at this and make sure that they're capturing all the billing that should be present for each of the procedures you do. After the procedure summary is the procedure details section, and this has been separated into chronological modules. The reason for doing this is so that it can follow a logical flow of the procedure, and I think it just makes a lot more sense to separate things in this way rather than having it all mixed in together. So each module is separated by an underlined heading, and so it goes in chronological order. Starts with pre-procedure. That would include any relevant imaging review, a statement about informed consent for the procedure. If you like, you could put your own text in this very easily by just editing it here in this exact window. But we just left a general statement about informed consent and timeout. We put a prophylactic antibiotic, and this isn't actually to list the specific antibiotic, but just the timing of it, because this is one of the quality indices that will be followed is that if you use an antibiotic for your port or for any other central venous access, that antibiotic should be administered within 1 hour of procedure start time or within 2 hours for vancomycin or fluoroquinolones. So that's made as one of the pick list selections to make sure that you're fitting in with that quality metric. Other options are also present. Maybe they didn't get antibiotics, maybe it was given more hours ahead of time, maybe the patient was already on antibiotics, so all those options are present within it. Preparation is another quality metric that will be gathered, and so this basically allows you to state whether the site was prepared using all the elements of maximal sterile barrier technique, and then if that was not the case, it can give a reason for the exception from that rule. And so this allows, again, a way to auto collect quality metrics, which is part of the way that we're going to get maximal pay for the procedures that we do. So that's the pre-procedure section. That follows into the anesthesia or sedation section. Medications don't need to go on here. Medications are in the MAR. They're in the medical record. And so we thought it best not to include them in the procedure report because it just creates the possibility of error and also creates more work for the person doing the dictation. So I think that those medications should be left in the MAR, and this just describes the level of sedation that was provided and who administered that sedation, and then for billing purposes, the duration of sedation. Of course, if you feel otherwise and want to include the specific medications in your report, it's very easy just to add that as an extra line in this module. Following the sedation module is the access module, and this uses very general language so that you can edit this for your institution, but I tried to make it pretty universal. So local anesthesia was administered. This is for port being done under ultrasound access, and then whether a access ultrasound image was stored or not. Certain procedures you can bill extra for having a ultrasound image stored, and therefore proving that you used ultrasound for access. Not the case in all procedures, but we went ahead and put that in there. You can say what vein was accessed. Any particular findings, it just defaults as patent. Wherever the red text is in any pick list is what is the default answer to that pick list, and then the ones that are in black are the other options in the pick list. We'll see that when we actually use the report. And then access technique, again, this could be customized to your institution and then defaulted to whatever you prefer to use. Beamography module, I realize that most port placements or other central venous access, you will not do beamography, and so you could just highlight this and delete it, or you could remove it from your template. I wanted to keep it in there just so that we had a module for it for those cases where you do have to do venography, and that anytime you want to bill for a venogram or angiogram, there's 3 things that are looked for by the billers, and that is what location are you in, so they can tell whether it's first, second, or third order. The indication why you're doing that venography, because certain reasons may be acceptable for billing, and other reasons, such as if you're just mapping or seeing your catheter location, those may not be billable, and so that indication needs to be specified, and then of course the findings of that venogram. This follows with the actual port placement, and again, some very general language here about the incision being made and what location it was made, depending on what kind of port was being placed, and then some general language about the actual insertion of the port that you could change according to the way you like to place ports. And then just the most crucial information here, what catheter size there was, and then that's followed by a measure of catheter tip position. Now, tip position we have described up in the impression. What the expected location of the tip position is. This is really for the clinician's benefit, but for true determinant of the exact position, we all know that the cavoatrial junction is extremely variable in its position, and so there's an effort underway to try to standardize better exactly where our tip position is, and the best way to standardize that is by using the number of vertebral body units above or below the carina, and that then allows us this to be captured as a data point and allows us to determine, after gathering hundreds or thousands of these, what the optimal position above or below the carina is for tip position, because now this is more of an absolute rather than just a relative, what you think, where you think that tip is. This is something that's actually reproducible. So you can enter the catheter tip position in relation to the carina. We have a space for the UDI, which may not be required just yet, but is something that will be required soon. Every catheter is going to have a unique device identifier, and that number can be inputted here. And then what you use to flush the catheter. Finally, there's a closure module with some generalized language, then the technique you used for closure of the access site and the incision, and whether you left the port accessed. These contrast agent and volume, this is defaulted to none and 0 for port placement, but they can be entered if contrast was used. And the fluoro time can be entered here. These are the 3 radiation measures that we'll be looking for in all of our procedures. And as of now, this is something we want to be able to capture directly from our fluoro machines or from Epic, but thus far Epic and PowerScribe haven't been able to talk to each other enough to do that yet. So as of now, these are you still have to type these in or have someone type them in for you. This is followed by an additional details section. This basically allows you to add anything that really wasn't captured in any of the above selections. And so that could be if you had to do anything additional to help get this port in place, if there are any additional findings that weren't really part of any of these modules, and then any useful or additional equipment that is really for the benefit of you or other interventionalists in the future to help do a similar procedure. This is required, a specimens removed section. This is default to none, and estimated blood loss is also required for any operation, including IR procedures. A label of the exact standardized report that was used, and then the very last line is an attestation line that will autofill with your signer name and then say whether you were actually present within the room, or whether you were present for parts of it but immediately available, or whether you were supervising the procedure but not in the room itself. And so that's basically the complete report. It seems like a lot, but because a lot of it is defaulted, you can actually get through these reports quite quickly, and they're quite data rich and allow population of registries and other research functions very well. So let's try closing that out, and we'll just pull this up as if I was doing a real dictation. So we'll just enter a dummy accession number here. And then the way we would pull one of these reports up is just click on the Auto Text tab, and then we'll go to the port. And now this has autofilled a few fields, including my name. So in this case, we can just tab through or click through. No fellows or residents. This is all the defaulted. The pre-procedure diagnosis has to be typed in. This is something that we could auto-import from Epic, but it isn't always particularly accurate, and so for now we left that as something that can be typed in. Post-procedure diagnosis defaults as same, and then indication is a pick list. You can see the pick list choices over here, and so we could just click on one of these, and so administration of chemotherapy is the one we selected. This defaults as no complications, and then really the impression contains all the really vital information that the clinician would want to know. So which side was this on, so we can click that it was right-sided, whether it was power injectable or non-power injectable, how many lumens it has. Most ports are single lumens, so we just defaulted that, and usually this is a chest port, so that's defaulted as well. And the tip location where we expect it to be, there's a number of selections there. It's defaulted to cavoatrial junction. Procedure summary is all defaulted. Imaging review is all defaulted. Prophylactic antibiotic depends on your institution. Let's say we did give it, and if we did, we can say that it was within the time criteria that's been laid out. The preparation statement is all defaulted as that preparation was performed, but that can be changed if not. Anesthesia, this defaults to what's most commonly done, which is moderate sedation, and then that's administered by an independent trained observer, which is a nurse in almost all cases. The duration of sedation, we can just type in that. It's billed in 15-minute blocks. For access, we have this defaulted language, and then what vein, usually it's internal jugular vein, so that's defaulted. Any ultrasound findings, that's a pick list, whether it's patent or partially or completely thrombosed or narrowed or chronically occluded, so that defaults to patent. And then access technique is a pick list, so we could say we used a micropuncture set here. If you didn't do Beamography, I find it easiest just to delete that and get rid of that module so that no one's confused. The port placement module, this is defaulted for a chest port where the location of the incision is, and then catheter size can be typed in place. Catheter tip position is defaulted at 2.5 VBUs below the carina, but there's a wide selection available so that any position on the frontal radiograph or spot film that you take at the conclusion of the case, you can just double click to enter that. Those are at quarter vertebral body unit intervals. UDI defaults to not available. I don't know that everyone is doing that yet, so you can change that at your institution or type that in if you have it. And then this is just the most common catheter flush we see used. The closure is defaulted to what we use here, but certainly that can be changed for your institution. And it's defaulted to no contrast. We've got the blanks available for flow time, air kerma, and dose area product or kerma area product. It's the same thing. Be careful of the units here. These are the default units, but those can be changed for your institution. This is all defaulted language. You can add more if you need to, but in most cases you don't need to. My name's already here, and it defaults that I was there for the procedure. I'm now ready to sign it off. So really, I can get through this report if I wasn't explaining it as I went in less than a minute, and I think it's really quite effective. Allows the capture of a lot of data and really provides the data that the clinicians want to have. I'll go ahead and show quickly a little bit more complex of a report. So we could try pulling up a uterine artery embolization report. Now, as you can imagine, any sort of angiography or embolization procedure is going to have a lot more options, which makes making a standardized template a lot more difficult. But when we basically keep the layout and format the same for all of our reports, and then you can basically change each module as necessary to default it to what you do at your institution. But we've tried to make it fairly generalizable so that you can do it at your institution. So let's delete this, and we'll add in the UAE template. So again, this all follows the same layout, procedure, and personnel. The diagnosis defaults to what the most common diagnosis would be. Indication is, again, can be selected from a pick list, and then the impression basically states that it was technically successful. Plan, you can change according to a pick list, and then when you plan to see the patient next. So if you plan to see him in clinic in 1 month. So some of the most common options are present in a pick list here. The procedure summary, you can see, is quite a lot more complex than it was for the port placement. This is just the most common procedures that would be performed. If you do more or do less, then this procedure summary could be edited. The point of this really is, again, for billing and to summarize for other people that are reading the report to know exactly what you did. Some of this is repeated later, although I try to reduce or try to completely eliminate any need to repeat or retype or redictate the same thing twice in any of these reports. This is the only exception. Sometimes in the procedure summary, you might need to type something in that's also present below, and that's just for the benefit of the billers, really. So the procedure details section is a little bit more complex for uterine artery embo, but it follows the same basic pattern, including pre-procedure, what kind of anesthesia was administered, an access module, including how did you access the artery, what artery did you access, what sheath did you place. And then where things start to really differ is with the arteriography module. So again, as I described, for billing purposes, the billers will need to know what vessel you're at, why you're doing arteriography in that vessel, and then what the findings were. You need those three things to do billing. And so the most common vessels that you would catheterize are all defaulted for this report. You could change this around according to how you do a uterine artery embo. Maybe you never do an aortogram, but in this case we have a module for the aorta. The indication is to determine anatomy, evaluate for ovarian artery supply. The most common findings are defaulted, but this is a pick list where you can specify any other variants or findings as you like. The uterine appearance and ovarian supply, all defaulted findings here that you can change according to a pick list. Most commonly, the next vessel that be catheterized is the left internal iliac, so we have the same vessel catheterized, indication, and findings as pick lists, followed by the left uterine. whether that was dominant, codominant, or a lesser supply to the uterus, whether there is a cervicovaginal branch, and then continuing with all the diagnostic angiography on the right side. Now, all the arteriography is in one large module, and that's followed by the embolization module, and that's separated into what kind of embolization did you do on the left, where exactly were you embolizing from in the uterine artery, and what your endpoint was. And we tried to define endpoint based on complete stasis, near stasis, slowed flow, or pruning, and we try to define those so that you'll know exactly which one to select. And again, that'll be useful for research purposes, or if we want to look back and see which was the most effective angiographic endpoint, this will allow us to gather that data by standardizing it. Same thing for the right uterine artery. Some people use two different types of embolics in UAE, so we left that option available. So the initial embolic, whether that be all the different varieties of embospheres or PVA, embosine, quadrispheres, etc., and then what the volume was. And that volume we do as the actual volume of the embolic. So, for example, most embospheres are 2 cc's of actual embolic, so that's the amount that we put in to the embolic volume here. Any additional particle embolic, if you use it, has a space for that there, as well as that volume and a gel foam sponge with a pick list for just how much was used. So a little bit different from what we've seen before. Then we go to a closure template, and this is a little different from the port, of course, because it's closure of an artery. It allows you to do to dictate what kind of angiography was performed at the access site, what that indication and findings were, and then what your arterial closure technique was. So this has a variety of different closure devices, so we can put one in like a perclose, and then again we've standardized also how do we determine success of arterial closure. So we've basically defined it as successful, partially successful, or unsuccessful for closure devices. So a successful closure device means you got hemostasis immediately. Partially successful means that you needed up to 5 minutes of supplemental compression. Unsuccessful means that you needed more than 5 minutes of compression past your closure device to achieve hemostasis. Or if it was manual, you can say how many minutes of manual compression were required. Also has options for radial closure. We have fields there for the contrast agent and volume. That's a pick list. Of course, you can add whatever contrast agent you use at your institution, and then type in the contrast volume and the radiation doses. And again, another additional details section where you can put in any additional descriptions, findings, or details, and ending with the attestation statement. So it's a little bit more cumbersome, but still much less cumbersome than our initial group of standardized reports that we put out last year. I think these are much, much faster. I think they're much easier to understand. They're organized in a chronological way. Clinicians really liked having an executive summary up front. That was part of our pilot study, was actually surveying clinicians to see how they liked our reports to be organized. And it was quite strongly in favor of having an executive summary where they could see all the important information up front and then follow that with the technical details. So that's why that was done in that way. Because we use so many pick lists, and because each of these would be searchable by what heading we use, so basically it's a heading followed by a pick list, we can gather data very quickly and very easily for research purposes or registry purposes. And I think that having all of the arteriography and embolization in one section will actually make it easier for billers and make it more likely it will be able to bill for everything that we do, because everything that they need is right in each of these modules to make sure that you can capture the appropriate billing codes. I'm always available for any questions. Certainly these are a work in progress. We're on I've gone through a number of iterations of these reports, but they'll be we'll continue to fine-tune them as we get feedback from users. You can reach me at jumcwilliams@mednet.ucla.edu is my email, and happy to give any more guidance or help with these reports, and also would be very happy to hear feedback on ways that we can improve them. Thanks very much. I hope that's helpful, and thanks. Bye.